Okay.
Larry, you're muted.
Yeah, I see. Okay, we're opening the board meeting of January 18th, 2021. I need a roll call.
Director, excuse me, Director Gibson,
Here.
Director Kohler,
Here.
Director Schmidt,
Here, and it's 2022, just for recording sake.
Oh, good idea.
Yeah, good catch.
Winding back the clock, trying to get that rain back.
Yep.
Another shot of rain.
and President Russell.
Here. Okay, with that, we're going to adjourn into closed session.
Actually, President Russell, we
Open.
have adoption of the agenda, if you want to go ahead and do that one. and
Oh,
then we-
okay. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Sure.
Roll call.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
President Russell.
Aye.
And then I don't see any attendees, so there's probably no public comment on the closed session items.
That is correct. There
Okay.
are no attendees.
So do we need to ask for it, or that's just?
I
something?
think we covered our base. So
Okay.
we'll see you at the closed session.
Okay,
Thanks, Em.
Go ahead, sir.
okay. So the closed session was adjourned at 6:38 with no reportable action. Now we are into public comment on subjects not on the agenda.
Sure. The first person I see is James Krajewski. Mr. Krajewski.
Hi, thank you. Another month and there's still no fix for the ongoing problem of finding information about water use on the district's website. Water users should not have to dig through pages and pages of multiple documents to find basic information, such as the use of water by various categories. The water use data need to be aggregated into a section that's easy to find and provides an analysis of use by various parameters. For example, by types of business, by entities such as towns, or categories such as golf courses. Why is essential data scattered all over the website rather than being aggregated in an easy to find spot? The district can also enhance transparency by rethinking how it structures its reports and meeting agendas, such as tonight's agenda package. For example, the package of pages is not consecutively numbered. Alternating between the district's meeting agendas and the background reports requires endless scrolling. Reports online suffer from similar problems, so trying to find a particular appendix may require scrolling through hundreds, literally hundreds of pages. Earlier this month, Tom Butt, the mayor of Richmond, sent out a notice of a new format for agendas of the city council meetings there. The formatting makes it simple to follow the agenda and quickly switch to the background material for each agenda item. For example, in a PDF format, all pages are consecutively numbered, and each agenda item includes the page number of the background attachments. In another available format, the background material for each agenda item is accessible by a single click. The Water District should follow their lead and fix the problem of the confusing agenda layout and the unnumbered pages of attachments that can go on seemingly endlessly. In this modern age of communication, it should not be difficult to make basic data and other communications, such as agendas and reports, easily accessible and user-friendly. Not doing so can foster questions of credibility, transparency, and competency. Such questions only complicate the search for solutions as we move forward to longer range solutions to our water problems. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have the moderator. Go ahead, moderator.
Sorry about that. This is Mimi Willard. I need to change my settings on Zoom. Regarding the discussion at the last district operations committee meeting, I am concerned about the prioritization, the second priority for a potential bond measure being identified as AMI. Advanced metering infrastructure, imposing, and the gist of it would be to implement smart meters throughout the entire customer base, which is problematic, I think, because I don't see how you can guarantee that under the current or any future management or board, it will not be used as an enforcement mechanism. In other words, what people might interpret as spyware. And that people today are increasingly sensitive to privacy concerns and government overreach. So I think this is potentially a really big issue for you. Number two, probably more importantly, 20 million of spending on AMI as the second largest potential spending category within the bond measure kind of comes out of nowhere, in that this did not arise out of some disciplined ranking effort as far as your water supply priorities, and you've only got so much money to go around, and there should be a really thoughtful approach as to what gets funded. So, you know, discipline as far as ranking and commitment to increasing water supply and water storage is what many people feel has been lacking from the board. And so to go ahead and leapfrog AMI into this important position, I think is a wrong move. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker we have is Ed. Ed?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Loud and clear.
I'd like to start by seconding Mr. Krajewski's suggestion that aggregated data be available. I've looked around and had difficulty finding out how much goes for commercial, for example, versus golf courses. It's probably all scattered in various places, but it'd be useful to have that. So I just second his suggestion. I missed last Friday's operations meeting, but I did catch up with it in the Zoom video. What we need now, above all else, is drought-resistant additional supply, and we need to fix our crumbling infrastructure. In last Friday's meeting, I was disappointed to see that among the district's top priority capital projects, in the number 2 position, right behind Pine Mountain, is now $20 million for AMI. AMI? Are you kidding me? In the second of last spring's 10-year planning sessions, AMI was in the last 4th category of an $800 million laundry list of possible capital projects. But back then, Ms. Kohler insisted that it be given a high priority. So now it's at number 2, to provide the ability for so-called demand management, or what appears to me to be potentially full-function spyware. If any of you haven't read 1984 by George Orwell, you really ought to give it a read. You'll quickly be introduced to Big Brother, and you may suddenly see yourself in a mirror. To his credit, Vice President Schmidt last Friday suggested that AMI may not appropriately be in the number 2 position if funding is not unlimited. I'd like to suggest that the board give his suggestion some consideration and give up on any idea of spying on your customers. You ultimately work for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no further comments.
Okay. Okay, directors and general managers announcements.
I have one. I just want to let everybody know that we did not have a North Bay Watershed Association meeting in January. The next one is scheduled for February 4th. They show up generally the first Friday of the month. That's February 4th. And just further, then this is getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but there has been a little bit of discussion, and I'm sure there will be more, about joining with the North Bay Water Recycle Association. So that's a little bit of activity going on that you'll probably be seeing more on.
Great. I really appreciate your mentioning that, Jack. I think that'd be a great idea.
Mhm.
Okay, Cynthia? Larry?
Just want to thank staff, Jonathan, Kohler, Sean, and Eric gave Monty and I a really nice inspection tour of the 13 habitat restoration sites on the lower Lagunitas Creek. So it's a really exciting and ambitious program. And I think it's actually where we could be breaking ground on it in the next year or two. And very exciting, especially in light of this year's pretty good news as far as the salmon are concerned in Lagunitas Creek. So it's kind of neat to see things actually help restore this habitat. So I just wanted to thank staff and put it all on your radar.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thank you.
If I could echo that too, it was really informative, and this is a lot of the work that goes on in Lagunitas Creek is stuff that is familiar to me and other things that I work on. And I just want to say that MMWD is recognized as a leader in how we are working to protect and restore our coho populations, which is so incredibly important. It's good to, I think it's just worth knowing that the agency is really respected for the work that we're doing and the information that we're learning, which is helping us to not only be really effective or more effective at what we do, but it's information that's being shared broadly in the restoration community. So big kudos to our staff for running such a great program that's so deeply well respected. And it helps us to raise money, frankly, to be able to do the kind of projects that Director Bragman is talking about. That helps us to do good work and get funding to be able to pay for it.
Thank you. Okay, we are instituting a new policy tonight, which is that the chair of a committee will report out on the activities of the committee that occurred between the board meetings. So I'm taking this opportunity to present the Operations Committee report for Friday, January 14th, 2022. There were 4 items that were significant at that meeting. The first was an update on the fire flow program, which is a program that is funded by a fee that is attached to a parcel of property. And the money is used to eliminate pinch points in the distribution system. The bottom line of it is it's the 9th year of the 19-year program. There's $48 million remaining to replace 30.8 miles of pipe. That's going to be a little short, it looks like, to complete all of that work. So we'll see where that goes and where we make up the difference. Second, the staff provided an update on the pipeline extension agreement for Marydale Townhomes. And that's an item that's going to come before the board at the next meeting. The committee also discussed reviewing or modifying the current drought restrictions. The committee asked staff to continue forward with a public hearing that is scheduled for this evening so that we may consider reviewing current water use limits and associated penalties. Bring forward recommendations in early February for the full board to consider potentially removing or modifying current water use restrictions and rescinding or revising the local water shortage emergency declaration. Prepare recommendations to integrate some of the water restrictions into our ongoing formal conservation program so that the board may consider this at a February meeting. Explore options for providing recycled water to customers who do not have access to our purple pipe system, including looking at options for a permanent drive-up location, as well as looking to truck the water and deliver it at their house. Lastly, staff provided the committee an overview of the district's capital program and potential bond funding needs. The committee directed staff to bring the item back to the Finance and Administration Committee for further discussion. So going forward, I think I don't know where else to put it other than in director's announcements. So either we need to schedule it into the agenda or we need to put it where I'm putting it. So each of us will be asked to do that task of the ones that chair the committee so that they can report out to what happened at the committee so that folks don't have to go or listen to all of the tapes to find out. Okay. So with that, I need a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Move approval.
Second,
Roll call.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye. Okay, now we'd like to start into our regular agenda. Certifying review of the amended final environmental impact report for the Oakview Master Plan.
Hi, good evening, directors. Crystal Yesman, Director of Engineering. I'm going to present this item tonight. This item was first brought to the Operations Committee on November 19th, 2021, where it was referred to the full board for discussion. This is a pipeline extension agreement for the Talus Reserve. This project was started back in 1999, 23 years ago, and eventually led to the County of Marin, who's the lead agency, certifying the EIR and the Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Plan on January 11th, 2005. And if the Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Plan is implemented as indicated, it would be adequate to mitigate all environmental impacts to less than significant. Now, in terms of the pipeline extension agreement, Marin Water needs to look at the EIR to determine whether or not the activities associated with installation of an extension of pipelines also meet those requirements. So this project will construct 28 single-family homes and 5 ADUs. In order to serve the community, those houses with water, the district has determined, staff has determined that it's going to require 1,840 feet of 8-inch potable water main, 1,860 feet of 4-inch recycled water main, 6 6-inch potable hydrants, 1 6-inch recycled water hydrant, 33 1-inch potable services, 29 recycled water services, mostly 5/8 inch and 1 1-inch. This development will need to purchase entitlement for water supply totaling 9.59 acre-feet a year. 7.5 acre-feet of that is for residential units and 2.09 is for the landscaping, which would be fed through irrigation. So with that, the staff is recommending that the board adopt a resolution certifying the amended EIR and use permit for Talus Reserve and approving the final extension agreement, that you also adopt a resolution making determinations with respect to the fees contained in the agreement, and adopt a resolution finding impending peril of gradual earth movement and determining and undertaking appropriate action if necessary to halt, stabilize, or abate such peril. With that, I'll go ahead and open it up for board comment and questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
My understanding, and just confirm this for me, that there's minimal landscaping on the project, and that there is will be covered by recycled water. Am I right about that?
Right. The applicant is required to submit their landscape plan for review, and our district staff will be looking at it to make sure that it meets our requirements for plantings that are, drought resistant. And all of the landscaping will be irrigated through recycled water connections.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And why is there one fire hydrant on potable? Why weren't they all on reclaimed?
Well, there's 6 potable hydrants and 1 recycled water hydrant.
Oh, I got it the other way around. And why aren't they
Yeah.
all on the recycled then instead of on the potable?
Well, we did consult with the fire district on this project, and they determined that we needed a certain volume or flow for fire, which was 1,500 gallons per minute at 20 PSI. Whether it's recycled or potable, I think comes down to water quality impacts and I would have to, I'm not sure I can answer the question other than perhaps the potable water system has a higher pressure. and guaranteed supply because it's sized appropriately with the storage tanks from the Lucas Valley system. And we have to have enough storage in order to meet a fire of a certain magnitude and duration. It's my guess that the potable water system has that available capacity while the recycled water system does not. It's not sized for fire flow purposes.
That would surprise me though, Crystal, because of the tank at Las Colinas. We just installed that 4 million gallon tank there for the one that's chlorine contact.
Mhm.
You know, it's bigger than anything in the area that I'm aware of in terms of storage. Maybe we could take a look at that and see. I mean, I suppose it doesn't really matter because it's only used in emergencies, so it's really not a demand. It's just an option, really.
Is
So
that,
about, go ahead,
is
Jeff.
that within the authority of the fire department, or do we have some discretion there?
Using recycled versus potable for fire flow? That's a good question. I think it's our discretion in terms of our storage capacity and we've been upsizing all of our potable pipelines were needed to provide adequate fire flow. And it's very possible that the recycled water system, the rest of the distribution system for recycled water was not sized for fire flow. Yeah.
Well, let's find out.
Okay, I'll
And
find out.
It looks to me like about, at this point in time, 2 out of the 10 acre-feet are coming from reclaimed, something like in that order, based on the annual consumption estimate.
Right, that right now is an estimate, President Russell. We will not know the exact percentages until they submit their landscape plan for review. Because it's
Okay.
dependent on the plantings that they, plan on irrigating.
Okay.
I don't know why this development is not being required to double plumb the units. And I've made an inquiry to staff, and it's a little bit technical, but the California regulations permit us to require recycled water to condominiums. And condominiums are defined under the civil code as a development that consists of an undivided interest in common in a portion of real property, coupled with a separate interest in space called a unit. Well, that's what we have here. We have separate properties, separate lots with a common interest in a common area. So it may not be called a condominium, but it sure works like a condominium. And that question has really not been answered. And it just seems, given the circumstances that are unfolding with our water supply, that it's a real missed opportunity not to at least answer that question before we approve this agreement.
If I can, Director Bragman, we have looked at that issue, and the single family homes, these are actually described as single family homes, even though they have an accessory dwelling unit and a common area. So the common area is just the landscaping parcels where they have a common ownership in, and that I agree with you. I think that the definitions in the civil code for condominiums are a bit opaque. But nonetheless, I think this development would be clearly looked at as single-family residential and not as condominium units. And I think the difference is these are not units. These are standalone residences that happen to have a common ownership in a landscape parcel.
Is it
Right.
Is it within our jurisdiction to require dual plumbing there? Or do we just simply not have the authority?
We don't have the authority under state law to require recycled water use for toilet flushing unless it is consistent with that condominium exemption for residential purposes.
Yes, but the law will change on that. At least that's the common opinion, and it will be much more available. And if we have the plumbing in, we've got a head start.
That's stubbed out there, but not actually utilized.
Right. And I
That's
think
possible. I don't know that.
Yeah, I think we've done it before on some projects, you know, I'm thinking a hotel and that sort of thing.
Yeah, none of them on single family though, Jack. But you trigger an interesting question, Larry and Jack. I don't know that we couldn't take the lead here and approach the health department, the regional board, about an exemption around the regulation. One thing you didn't mention, or at least I didn't hear, Crystal, is when is this thing supposed to happen?
Well, they've already started construction. The grading is complete on site. So is the stormwater drainage system. If you go out there, you can take a look. They have not started constructing the buildings yet. I believe the rain delayed them.
Okay, so we might be a little late, huh?
Well, maybe not. I mean, it might be worth at least looking into it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you got a 20-year-old EIR. I mean, I don't want to belabor it, but it really could be an opportunity. I mean, I understand there are restrictions on requiring use of recycled water, but installation of dual plumbing, I think, is within our authority.
Well, if I could add, you know, I'm not a lawyer, but my reading of the state regs was that single family homes are specifically prevented from installing dual plumbing. It's against the code, California state code, to install dual plumbing in a single family home.
And that's the part I'm talking about getting the exemption from.
But
Are you
it's-
talking about the building code or Title 22?
It's the water code is what she's
And
referring to.
I
So it's Title
believe
22.
Paul may be able to weigh in. I believe part of the reasoning in those regulations is a condominium has a central point of responsibility that can hold the permit and manage it. When you move to single family homes and something like this, that entity doesn't exist. Paul, is that part of it? Can you?
Yeah, it's definitely part of it. Crystal and Molly are correct. Single family residences are expressly called out in the code as not being allowed to have dual plumbing, that is recycled water inside the building envelope. And for the reasons that you stated, Ben, there's no common management of it. And so
they're explicitly prohibited from installing dual plumbing.
there is nowhere in California that has a single family residence with dual plumbing. I'm not sure we could get an exception to this. This is a state law, so it would kind of be an interesting exercise. But I don't know, Molly, if you have any thoughts on exceptions.
You know, I don't. I haven't seen that type of request before, so I'd have to look into it before I could opine.
Well, to me, it's kind of a distinction without a difference. I don't know. I mean, here we're requiring Marydale, which is going to come on our agenda in the next couple of weeks. And here we're not. And I'm not saying I'm just saying, you know, we're trying to follow the laws as best we can. But I don't know if there's a prohibition on requiring dual plumbing as much as there's a prohibition on delivering recycled water. So
Yeah.
That would be the distinction as far as our authority is concerned. So I don't know how the rest of the board feels. I mean, it's just, it's an issue that's sort of been nagging at me since this thing first appeared on our agenda a few weeks ago or a couple months ago. And I've tried to, you know, sort of burrow down on the issue of our authority. And you come smack up to the civil code, which has this opaque definition of what a condominium is.
But I do believe that there's likely definitions of single family residential, and condominiums are, they do go on to say that it's a unit that can be airspace, that can be land, that can be separated from the land and can be a common ownership, you know, access to the property only by easement. So it's pretty descriptive, though agreeably opaque, and not as explicit as we might want, but everything in my past experience tells me that no one's going to interpret the single family residential parcels, lots, separate lots as condominiums.
Well, rather than let's getting into legalese battle, let's ask the question.
Yeah.
What can it hurt? We asked the health department, would you be willing to waive this for this? I think it's a good point, Larry. The problem I'm feeling though is that we're, like I said, I know you've been pushing on this, but we're a little late because if they've already completed the grading, that means there isn't enough water, I don't think, to do that. Although, correct me if I'm wrong, Crystal, each house has a reclaimed water connection for
They will,
irrigation.
yes, we're requiring a recycled water meter at each house.
So we have the potential the water's already there, but the
Right.
line's probably too small to feed them all, but maybe it's not. So let's find out what our situation is. I will tell you, Larry, from previous experience in folks who had the need for reclaimed water, but who didn't want it, the developers go crazy in this if we ask them to dual plumb. There was a hotel proposed on Sir Francis Drake at the site of the old Ross Valley treatment plant, and getting him to put it in, the whole shopping center is dual plumbed because it was anticipated we would have reclaimed water there 25 years ago or 45 years ago or whenever it was built, but it never happened. So, and you're correct, Larry, that it's only the cost of, it's a fairly minor cost. It's only the cost of running another pipeline parallel to feed the toilets. That's all it is. It's not a lot of money. But you know what happens. It's like, you're killing me.
Yeah.
So,
the same code says the legislature finds that the use of potable water for toilet and urinal flushing is waste or an unreasonable use of water.
Right.
Yep.
So I think it's worth tracking it down one more time. I mean, that's the way I feel about it. I don't know if the rest of the board feels, an urgency to approve it tonight or not.
I think we should put in dual plumbing at every opportunity we can, because if for no other reason, the law is evolving, that the use of reclaimed water will be wider than it is now,
I really agree with that. I think that's exactly right. I think putting in dual plumbing is a great idea to the extent that, we can make it happen. I mean, we need to be as resilient as we can be going forward.
So
yeah, there's no backing up here. That's clear. Once it's built, it won't get replumbed.
No.
Right.
So the only opportunity is now.
That's
Right.
right.
And so let's pick up that ball, Ben. Can we approve it with a provision? Does it need to be approved tonight, Crystal?
I'm not sure whether or not we're delaying their construction at this point in time. I can't answer that question.
I assume we'll find out real quick if we
Yeah.
don't approve it.
Why don't we just put it over to the next meeting? I mean,
Yeah, so
Well, can we approve it? Well, I guess the question is, how do we need to approve it? I mean,
No, let's do what Larry said. Let's put it over the next meeting. Okay. And then we got 2 weeks to look at the issue and talk to the health department. I have a feeling the answer will be quick and short, but I could be wrong. And Jack is exactly right. We have December of 23. It's less than a year and a half away when the regulations change. That could change everything.
yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Any comments, Molly?
No, I think it's within the board's prerogative to decide to put it over so that staff can look more closely at this issue and we can bring it back February 1st. I don't know that the situation will change. I do think there's, possibility of evolution in the law. I'd like to look specifically again at the regulations prohibiting the use. I think so. There's 2 avenues that I'm hearing. One is, can we require the infrastructure, or is that itself prohibited at this point as opposed to the use of recycled water for that purpose? And 2 is there an exemption to be had? We can certainly look at those things. and see if we can find more information if that's what the board is interested in before they approve the item or move forward on the item one way or another.
And I
Yeah,
think
well-
also we should approach the developer and find out if they would be willing to voluntarily do this. Like I say, it's like 100 feet of pipe in a house additional at the outside to plumb the toilets with a separate line that could be
I
cut in
do want to
later.
look at the language of the prohibition again to suss out that distinction. If
Yeah.
because
and
before we
we'll-
actually do it.
We'll contact the regulators on the exception and also try and get an understanding of, is this an issue they're seriously looking at? Or is this just a place, at this point, they aren't planning to look at specifically dual plumbing
Right.
of single-family residences? And then we'll also check the state of the construction activities to better understand the level of impact it would be. If we
Okay.
did proceed.
The they in your statement is the regulators.
Yes,
You said that they're looking into.
yes.
Yes. Okay.
And just to crystallize the issue, Molly,
Yeah,
it is whether we have the authority to require installation of dual plumbing without requiring delivery of the recycled water.
exactly. Exactly. I think it's a language in the law. Just to take a look at that in the regulations and see what it specifically says.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
Larry, President Russell will also looking at a
Yeah.
fire flow.
Yeah, Crystal, that's good. And like I said, we were successful with the hotel in strongly encouraging them to put the dual system in, even though we couldn't supply the water. So there is precedent in our, I don't have any idea what the name of that project was, but it shouldn't be too hard to track back. It was a hotel right at the end of the shopping center where the old treatment plant was on Sir Francis Drake. And we negotiated successfully with the developer to do that. So we do have precedent. Now that's a multi-family thing and, or whatever you call it. So maybe the rules are different, but let's look at our rules, Maggie, Molly, and get a report out on that next time.
Okay.
Okay, public comment.
There are none.
Okay, do we need to do anything to put this over or we just do it, Molly?
I think we're clear that we're going to bring it back at the next meeting. There's no action taken at this item.
Okay, okay, all righty. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 16, water supply update.
Good evening, Board. Paul Sellier, Operations Director, with the water supply report tonight. I can get my presentation to cooperate. So our water supply update tonight, we're going to, take a look at the current rainfall and storage, and then we'll take a peek at projections before moving into sort of a roadmap for the next 6 or 7 months as we get started on, really kind of putting together our water supply resiliency roadmap. And then we'll close out this evening with some next steps.
Yeah.
So tonight you can see the green line, our rainfall to date. That's since October. We're at 42 inches of rainfall, which is about 80% of the total average that we would receive in a year. And we're just 3 or 4 months into the year. Now there's only, a couple traditionally wet months left, right? The rest of January, February, and March. So we're doing pretty well in terms of rainfall. And you can see that's reflected in our storage levels. We're at about 76,000, just a hair over 76,000 acre feet, which is roughly 96% of total capacity. Again, a nice situation, given you can see where we were at the beginning of the water year, down in the sort of 27,000 acre feet range. So a lot of water has come into our reservoir system, and it's really, as we've noted in past meetings, been a gift for us. And so we take that.
A question, Paul, before you leave the last slide.
Yeah.
Right now, if we got no more rain, when do we run out of water?
So that was my next slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we're on the crystal ball slide now. this is our projected reservoir storage. The black line is sort of where we've been over the last couple of years, and here we are sitting kind of, nice and fat and happy here at 96% of capacity. If we didn't get another drop of rain, that would be this gray dotted line here.
Yeah.
So you can see, just noting that gray dotted line takes us at the end of the water year. So that's October 1st or end of September.
Okay.
We're going to be around 56,000 acre feet if we got not another drop of rain. Comparing that to where we were this past September at 27,000 acre feet. So there's, 30,000 foot difference of water between where we just were in September of 21 to where we would be in September of 22. So substantially better off. And even in fact, if you go back to September of 2020, we're even better off than we were in 2020, albeit by just a few thousand acre feet. And then that's if we get no rain at all. The other dashed lines above here do 25% of rainfall, which, just if we're doing the math, that's only 13 inches of rain in a year. That's a pretty low amount for us. And then the blue line at 50%, and then you can see the green line at average.
Right.
So if we get anything around 50% of average for the rest of the year here, we'll be spilling all of the lakes. Presently, we have Lagunitas, Alpine, Kent are all spilling at the moment. Bontempi, if you looked at it, you probably couldn't tell that it wasn't spilling. It's so close. It's right at the spillway. Nicasio Reservoir is about 1.5 feet from the spillway. And if you recall, that was a puddle of water during earlier in the year, back in September here, right? Just 4 months ago. It was 45 feet down. And now it's 1.5 feet down. So I think our water supply picture has changed. And it is the sort of fortuitous for us, of course, but it's not that terribly unusual. Our water system hydrology is very flashy. We get lots of rain in a very short period of time. And of course, we do know, and I think everybody has seen sort of the forecasts for the rest of January from NOAA, and the various folks that are looking at different models are indicating that maybe it's going to be a dry period of weeks coming up here, certainly through January.
Right. Am I right, Paul? I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but it appears to me, we always say we have a 2-year supply, which is too low compared to most water districts. We recognize that. But it appears that we are now at what we can have. We're pretty much with that 2-year supply if we got no more rain.
That's correct.
Okay, with that being so, the challenge is obviously, how do we increase that 2-year supply? What can we do to maximize that supply?
I'm going to let you give the rest of the presentation tonight.
That's the risk I take, no question.
That's the $64 million question. And just so happens I have a couple of slides that we don't get into a great deal of detail on it, but we just kind of lightly introduce the roadmap here, and take advantage of the full reservoir system that we have. Now, we did hear clearly from the board over the past several weeks and months that there is a commitment to improving our water supply resiliency. And so we wanted to express that very clearly here, and that we are committed to increasing our water supply resiliency so that we can continue to, as we have for the last 112 years, continue to meet our commitment to our customers to deliver clean, safe drinking water. And we don't take that lightly. Along with that, of course, we're going to continue, and that part and parcel is to develop long-term water use efficiency programs and make sure that we're not just wasting water. We're going to use it wisely in our service area. So what are we going to be doing? Well, we're going to take this time that we have at the board's direction to take a look at the intertie project from a kind of holistic environmental review of that project. And we'll be coming to the board in the beginning, early February, February 1st, I think is the board meeting for authorization for that. Coupled with that, we would like to take a look at water supply resiliency. So there's a strategic assessment that we're proposing for water supply that goes along in parallel with that. So you can see in the orange bars here, as we go from February through July is all that's shown at the moment, but that environmental review for the intertie will continue, presuming that the board wish it to. We will, during this time, be optimizing our existing water supply. So when our lakes are spilling, we're going to be using that water to the maximum extent that we can. So we'll be turning down the intertie from Sonoma and using the water that's spilling instead. And once the lakes stop spilling, then we'll be turning up the intertie to preserve the storage in the reservoir system. And so along in parallel with both those two, the environmental and the optimization of existing water supplies, we'll be conducting this water supply assessment. And over the February through June period, we're proposing to hold 3 workshops on water supply resiliency to engage the public. And around June, maybe July, depending on how the time frame pans out, the results of that will be a report that we can use to really make sure that if the intertie is the project that we need to be doing, or is there something else? Just make sure that we haven't overlooked it. You know, during the emergency, we're working very quickly, and this is just an opportunity for us to be able to look at and assess different alternate water supplies. And of course, in parallel, we're going to continue water use efficiency programs. And it's worth noting that this water supply assessment is being done very quickly. And it's only possible because of the actions the board's taken in the past with respect to water supply planning. Thinking we have a lot of information already developed on desalination. We know a lot of information on recycled water. And these are all things that the board has already looked at and studied in some detail. And so as we take a moment now to look and consider what some of the elements might be in a strategic water supply assessment, none of these will really come as a surprise to the board because you've all seen these before. Expansion of local storage, winter water from Sonoma, desalination, of course, the intertie to the East Bay, and water reuse, which will include environmental, using recycled water for environmental purposes. And then there are some other, more creative or innovative water supply projects that we could take a look at, but maybe in not quite as much detail as these others. So just briefly, right, looking at expanding local storage, it could be Sulahuli Dam that we would look at as one example. There's also Phoenix Lake. And while it's limited capacity there for raising a dam, maybe increasing our ability to pump water from that lake to capture the spill water more effectively than we currently can would be a worthwhile project. And of course, looking at Kent Reservoir, Peters Dam, which was last raised in 1983, and see if there's any potential to increase storage there. And then with respect to Sonoma, the 3 options we have are winter water, which I think the board's familiar with now, and of course, groundwater well rehabilitation that Sonoma is actually working on at the moment, and then aquifer storage and recovery. So we'll be looking at those with respect to Sonoma. And these are just some of the items. I think the consultant will probably have a slightly longer list. But desalination options, for example, might include a regional East Bay option or a regional North Bay, as well as taking a look at the local desalination. Of course, we have a whole EIR that's been done on that. So a lot of information exists there. With respect to any of the desal options, though, the board may recall, of course, that we have the ballot measure that's sort of blocking the financing or really preventing us from moving forward with a desalination plant should the board decide to do that. So I would say we'll be back maybe at another board meeting to discuss further whether this is something that you would like staff to pursue to to remove this, the existing ballot measure. And the intertie to the East Bay, of course, we're all familiar with the construction of the pipe and pumping facilities to move water from the East Bay to Marin. And then our water reuse options, including traditional purple pipe, which we've heard a little bit about here tonight, and then the different options for indirect potable reuse, direct potable reuse, and then the environmental releases. A couple examples of the sort of other category. We hear sometimes about fog capture. Folks are still very interested in reservoir dredging, could be cloud seeding, and of course, watershed management, where you're sort of selectively removing water-hungry trees on the watershed. Not forgetting, of course, that supply side is one thing, but we'll also be following through in this assessment with sort of a demand management side, where we're going to continue our efforts there. And you'll see, our enhanced programs and initiatives that the board's familiar with. I think you're going to hear a little bit about non-functional turf maybe tonight. And of course, we're still working to develop this net zero water program and using, looking at new technologies for leak detection. So sort of rounding out the summary for what we've talked about, the next steps for us will be back to the board February 1st, seeking authorization for a couple of contracts, one for looking at the water supply options, the other for ESA to start work on the environmental review of the intertie, because we don't want to lose any time. We have more time, but it's not unlimited. So we do need to keep moving. At middle of February 16th, the Communications and Water Use Efficiency meeting will be hitting on, an update on the water use efficiency program in general, and then I think an overview of long-term conservation efforts and initiatives. Also in February, and maybe early February, we'll be establishing the Resiliency Committee, and the board's expressed an interest in a water supply policy, which I think will be going to the January 27th Finance Committee meeting. And then in sort of March through June, I talked about we'll be setting up these sort of water supply resiliency workshops to engage with the public. And then by June, July timeframe, we should have that report on strategic assessment of our water supply options. And at that point, hopefully there'll be enough information for the board to sort of arrive at what the best either single option or suite of water supply options would be. And so that sort of concludes the update and the presentation this evening.
I have a question, Paul, again, if I can.
Yep.
You had a couple of lines in there about, I think Kent was one, ways that we extract more water from our existing Lagunitas Creek system.
Yeah.
Now, I get emails all the time with the question, why don't we just raise the dam? Why don't we, take whatever step we can to just squeeze more water out of Lagunitas Creek? I'm assuming that most of the techniques you're talking about relate more to storage as opposed to diversion of water from the creek. And the reason I say that is because Larry Russell sent me an article written by Bill Seeger back in about the early 1950s, right after they raised Kent Dam. And he said in this article that Lagunitas Creek is one of the most overdrafted watersheds in the state of California, and then he went on to demonstrate why that's so. And every time we built the dam, we had water rights that we applied for and received, but specific amount of they're set. We can't get more out of that. And then, of course, we got the 95-17 order that requires us to have specific releases for the fish. So I'm operating on the assumption that yes, we can get some stuff out of our reservoir system, but it will be storage, not getting more Lagunitas Creek water. Am I anywhere near correct there?
No, I think you are. It's still if you can increase the storage, it still could be quite beneficial to us, right? Can't 30,000 acre feet. If we had 60,000, I'm not saying that's a realistic number. I don't know. You just have that benefit of having that water available. You might not be able to use 60,000 in a given year, right? You'd still be limited to your diversions per your water right.
You can't take it out of the creek. I mean,
right. The creek system is going to have to be maintained. The flow will need to be maintained, and all of those, I'm sure, would be looked at, in some detail as we go forward, and identified, at least in the early stages of planning, as the risk. We would want to go into that with our eyes open.
So Paul, just to build on that, I had the same question as Jack. I mean, in the whole time I've been on the board, we've been, the idea of raising the dams has been fairly summarily dismissed by management as infeasible in light of our water rights. So it's interesting that that staff is now coming forward with these. I know they're not recommendations exactly, but they have arisen to a level that you feel they need to be re-examined. Have you guys taken another look? Is there some, it would be just,
Yeah.
it's a very significant change from what we're hearing from management, because it's been very consistent over over more than a decade that, raising dams is not feasible. And now it's looking like you guys have decided, well, it may be feasible. So can you unpack that for us a little bit?
Yeah, certainly. I can try to. I would say it's really borne out more of an unwillingness to simply take on the face of it that something is infeasible, rather than to really just question it. So a little bit questioning status quo. The other aspect is that fairly recently, you may recall, that we made an application for the TUCP, right, to change the releases from Kent. Something that we have never done before, and partly out of a concern for what impact that might have to water rights. So I think that's always sort of been the concern that staff has been anything that you do in terms of opening up water rights or even discussing water rights could end badly for the district, and reducing the amount of water that we could have for potable uses, and potentially increasing water for environmental releases. What we found during the TUCP process, I think, was a much more reasoned approach than maybe we had anticipated.
So so as part, I realize that you're just outlining what's going to be as part of this, larger resilience review, which I think is great. I feel like this is the kind of thing we've been doing almost every year that I've been on the board. So I'm not sure this is a new thing, but maybe you can speak to that a little bit. But the one thing that seems new is this idea that, are you talking about going back to the state board for an increase in the water right diversion? There's really no reason to raise the dam, right? Or any of these dams, unless we're looking to go to change our various water right permits, right?
Correct. So
if that's feasible, that's interesting. It just feels like a fairly, I don't want to say radical, but a very significant shift in what we've heard from management for the last at least 12 years.
I think we want to update our understanding of whether that's feasible or not at this point.
You mean legally feasible?
Yeah.
This has never been a matter of technical feasibility. This has always been legal feasibility, right?
Correct. That's correct.
I think
and you feel there's been a shift in the state board?
Or maybe it's our understanding, because we really haven't approached the state board in any aspect of water rights in any recent history, except under the TUCP process that we've just
right. But that's an emergency process. Again, I'm not quite. If you guys think we should go back to the state board and ask them if we can divert more water from the system, I think I'm not going to speak for the board, but my guess is that people would be somewhat open to that. It's just surprising, given what we've been experiencing in light of, the endangered species. And like I say, a very, very long-standing position on the part of management that was not likely to go in a constructive direction for the district. Right. So you've now decided, in light of the TUCP, is that it? That there's a new openness to that at the state level?
That we would like to explore that, at least.
Okay.
I think it's early in the process to draw any conclusions whatsoever about whether we would think that that's a viable option. But my sense is that we want to understand it better, this current staff, and make sure that we're fully looking at all options and not ruling it out before we are able to dig into it a bit deeper to see what that looks like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I just
I
would
think
say
that's
that this
fine,
is,
but I do think we need to be clear with the public that this is a shift and at least as far as I can tell, a fairly significant shift in management's approach.
Well, I think these sorts of things, whenever we've done any environmental studies on water supply, have always been addressed. They may have been addressed summarily, just a paragraph right off. And I don't know, we don't know where our recommendation will go with this particular item. We really do just feel like we need to explore it and not just accept the sort of historical reference that it's not going to go well for us.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's helpful context. Thank you.
And if
of
I could
course,
just jump in
remember,
there, I think that really truly what Molly just said is kind of the thing to focus on, which is this would be very uncharted territory. I don't think that we could predict how the water board would view a re-examination of our flow release requirements. I'll just say that in my experience, that when these things have been looked at, they have our modern knowledge of what fish need has generally tended to require more water released to streams, not less. So I'm not saying that would be the outcome, but I don't think that we could prejudge that. But I do think that going to the bigger point, which is the importance of doing this assessment, is to put all this information out on the table and to be I think we have to have absolute bluntness about the challenges and opportunities so that we can really weigh what these options are. I don't think there's been clarity around that in a way that I find that we have the same conversations, even in my short tenure on the board, conversations around desal and other things keep coming up such that the knowledge that we have gained with past studies has not stuck in a place where we go back to it and say, we've looked at that, it can be found right here, such that we build on our body of knowledge. So I see this report as being an opportunity to summarize a lot of great work that has obviously happened over time. There's no way we could really do a deep assessment, I think, of all these things if they were starting from scratch. So I think that we have a lot to build on. But I think that the assessment of each of these things, I think the criteria that we apply in terms of feasibility and cost and time to implement, I honestly think, things that look at drought resilience and climate resilience, how will that water supply fare into the future under climate scenarios, things like that we need to get out in front of the public, and we need to understand ourselves so that we can make some wise decisions about how to invest going forward into the future.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I just want to support staff, both current and former, in that, these are not new questions, right? These are issues that have come up, every single year. So we are, I think it's important to underscore that these are issues that, the excellent staff that we have been exploring. It's not as though any of these issues have been off the table, but I just want to be clear that this particular one feels like a bit of a shift, which is fine. It's always good to, go in a new direction, but I think it's really important to underscore that these are options that have been examined and reviewed and analyzed, really every single year.
Yeah. Let me make one thing clear here. I am not suggesting in what I said that we should look for ways to extract more water from Lagunitas Creek. That's not what I see here. What I see is that, first of all, we receive a lot of water from the Russian River that we have to use as we get it. We don't have the facility to store it. And at the same time, we have a lot of storage space in our reservoirs seasonally when they're lower. So I think we need to look at whatever engineering techniques we might be able to come up with that allows us to use the storage capacity of the reservoirs, again, not necessarily with a diversion of the creek, because I think, quite frankly, that's a blind alley. explore it and we'll see. But I just don't have a lot of hope for that. But I think there's plenty of things we could do with our reservoirs that actually increase the availability of water we have throughout the full season.
Yeah, keep in mind though, we're also talking about two different watersheds here. Sulahuli is Walker Creek. The rest are on Lagunitas.
Right.
So it's different. And I've been pushing and pushing on this, and we have a memo coming from Molly shortly about exactly what 9517 covers and what it doesn't cover. I think the part that got brushed over here too is the part that Paul mentioned about the risk of opening the door. I think that what Cynthia has been responding to there, and she's absolutely correct in that there has been a change in the way that's being looked at, is that there was a fear of opening that door, with the possibility being that, for instance, the state board goes back to their old position, which is they wanted us to release 50%, one half of the water, not one quarter. So, this is a walking on eggshells kind of situation, and let's not get our users all fired up that we've got a door that's going to open here, because it may slam on our fingers harder than we were wishing.
Yeah, we are
With
doing
that-
things with Phoenix. We're doing something I know right now with Phoenix, which is again not Lagunitas, that's Corte Madera Creek. But I
Right.
think we have some activity there that can help us. Go ahead, Larry. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, Jack, what you're talking about is increasing the yield into our reservoirs. So I think the project that Paul mentioned sort of in passing about Phoenix is actually a very important project. And I hope we don't have to wait for a consultant's report to get moving on it, which is simply to reroute it from Bontempi treatment plant into Bontempi Reservoir. I mean, the problem with Phoenix is that when it spills, there's so much sedimentation and low alkalinity that it becomes unusable for immediate treatment. Well, if we just reroute it to the lake, it's going to be diluted. We could probably pick up 1,000, 2,000 acre-feet in a good year. The other thing I wanted to mention, so I mean, to me, that project should be as big a priority as Castania. The other thing I wanted to mention, as far as increasing yield without increasing diversion, is strategic vegetation management. There was a study done by Presidio Graduate School in San Francisco, and they did a review of various water districts and water agencies that actually do strategic vegetation clearance. It's not clear cutting, but it's strategic vegetation clearance. They do it up in the Feather River. They do it in South Africa. And it definitely increases the runoff into the lake. So in a low precipitation year, we could increase the yield into the reservoir without increasing diversion from Lagunitas Creek. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention is, as we move forward with the full environmental review of the emergency pipeline, we're going to have to get into alternatives. And I think, this is, if you want to talk about opening a door, I mean, the project alternatives section of that environmental impact is going to get into this, but I'm very interested in increasing the efficiency of what we have, whether it's Sonoma, whether it's Phoenix, Sulahuli. We have to maximize what we have. And I just, speaking of that, just one other thing. Right now, even though we've relaxed on conservation on the call, we're at 20% reduction, right, according to the website as of this date. That's 5,000 acre-feet a year. So you multiply that out, you pick up 5,000 there, a couple thousand from Phoenix, some winter water, we're approaching resiliency at some point. So it's not as dramatic, but it may be just as effective.
Sure.
I just wanted, oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, let me just add this. Remember what our old friend Benjamin Franklin said: "Penny saved is a penny earned." So it's the exact same situation with water. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I just wanted to note, following up from Director Bragman, that at the next board meeting, we're going to bring a pretty detailed review of where we are with Castagna and what that effort has brought us. And I think the board and the public are going to appreciate and better understand kind of where we're headed and that the accomplishments we've made so far. So that's going to be a very, for me, important presentation for you.
Okay, any other comments from the board? How about public comment?
President Russell, we have 5 comments. Paul Duder and Phil Sauter, please. Paul Duder.
Hi, I think it would be good if we had what I have been calling a problem statement. That is a statement on how much supply we need. In past meetings, Director Russell has suggested that we need 4 years supply. Director Schmidt wrote an op-ed in the Marin IJ saying that we need 3 years supply. I think part of the problem with is that we kind of don't know how much we need. Here's an example. We went forward with the intertie and we stopped all of the other projects with this idea that the intertie was going to provide enough. But if we need 4 years supply, the intertie to the East Bay isn't enough. And so I think it would be good for us to have a problem statement so that we kind of know what we're trying to do. And then along with the problem statement, then I think it would be good for all of our projects to kind of specify how much they're going to deliver, to our gap. That is, if we have a conservation program that we think might yield 1,000 acre-feet, then we go ahead and we put that down so that we know where we are, in terms of the solutions that we need. Would it be possible to maybe just have a discussion of how much supply we need and to kind of get that settled? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to take a second to respond to that, because I think that Mr. Duder is raising an important question around when we do an assessment of these different alternatives, without knowing what our goal is, it's boundless. And it makes it very hard to determine whether there's one project that meets our needs or whether it's a suite of projects. I do think that this would be something that would be important for us to take on and to really give some thought to what is at least a range of what we are looking for, so that when we do this analysis, we know that we are looking toward a goal that we're trying to achieve at some point. So I think that would be something worthwhile, and I think would be great to have as an ongoing discussion, either in the operations committee or at our next board meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, on that point briefly, staff is anticipating the discussion where we're going to begin talking to the board about the water supply resiliency policy that you asked staff to bring back for discussion. We'll be doing that. And we were thinking that would be an opportunity to begin thinking about what our goal is and ideally embed it into that policy or resolution that would be established by the board. So that would kind of be the vehicle. So we do anticipate, I believe, at the end of the month, we'll begin that discussion.
I think the other thing that's important to keep in mind here regarding Mr. Duder's question is my comments about 4 years are industry standard. It isn't so much specific to our water district. One of the points that Cynthia has made throughout is that when she and I started on the board, the annual demand was something in the order of 33,000 acre-feet. It's now down to something like 25,000 acre-feet. And Larry Bragman is right. We're still operating at a 20% reduction. And for those who listen, My wife and I are still running at 35 gallons per day for 2 people without any draconian issues. We take showers, we run the dishwasher, we wash clothes. So we know it can be done. That's 17.5 gallons per person per day. It's a doable task. It makes you pay attention to it. But that's what makes the years a complicated measurement, because it depends on the demand. And as Cynthia has clearly indicated, what used to be 2 years demand is now, or 2 years supply is now 2.5 years supply. So, that's because of the reduction in demand. It didn't rain more. We didn't build any more reservoirs. We just have more available usage. So the problem is you don't want to put all the eggs in one basket. That's where the hooker comes in this. I think we have a very clear view of the amount of water needed. The intertie was put in, or conceptually put in, to solve a problem of having zero water. So at that point, any water is better than zero. And when the pipeline was built across the bridge in the 70s, it provided about 10 million gallons a day, which is roughly the same kind of numbers we're talking about. And that made the difference between Marin running out of water and Marin having water. It was as simple as that. So don't conflate the apples and oranges here, because we're really talking about different things. I agree with Mr. Duder. We need to figure out where we're going. I think that's a good idea. I think we know where we're going, but we could use some fine tuning on the numbers, and we will get that out of this.
Mr. Phil Sauter, then after Phil Sauter is Paul Mann. Go ahead, Mr. Sauter.
Thanks. First, happy 96%, everybody. I remember watching the reservoirs climb last month and thinking that any day now I can go wash my car. Then I went to the district's main webpage and saw the 40% conservation goal was still in place. And I thought, well, good for the district. It shows real awareness that we're forming the conservation habits today that we'll need for the next decade. And they're keeping the message front and center. So a few days later, I went to San Rafael and let them wash my car. Over the past few days, I've noticed that the conservation meter isn't available on the main page. I could find it, but it wasn't front and center. And that now there's consideration about doing away with penalties for excess water use. As an old marketing hack, I can tell you that changing long-term behavior is not going to happen with messaging that goes back and forth quickly. The way out of our water problems requires a long-term message and plenty of time for it to sink in. I'd like to suggest that the district adopt a strong and consistent message that stays in place for years and does not change with every heat wave and with every storm, even with an atmospheric river like we've recently had. When you tell folks what you've been telling them all last month no longer applies, you'll find it increasingly difficult to get them to pay attention to what you tell them next month. I can think of a number of long-term messages that district customers need to hear regarding conservation, one of which is how we can use conservation to increase our long-term water supply. My understanding is that we currently have 2 to 3 years of storage, which, given the uncertainty of future rainfalls, becomes a real nail biter. Those 2 to 3 years are consistent with the high demand scenario in the 2017 water use study. It's equivalent to 24 million gallons a day, or 127 gallons per capita. I'm not sure about others, but 3 years doesn't seem as long as it used to. If we wanted to stretch our supply to 3 to 4 years, we'd need to average 18 million gallons a day, or 95 gallons per capita. And if we wanted to stretch our supply to 4 to 5 years, which allows for a lot more comfort given climate uncertainty, we'd be using 14 million gallons a day, or 76 gallons per capita. As aggressive as they are, these numbers are not unreachable. I saw a few studies today, one of which shows all Californians using an average of 92 gallons per capita. In 2005, Californians were using 124 gallons per capita every day, which is equal to our high demand scenario. Another study showed that folks in Santa Cruz are using 48 gallons per day per capita. If Californians can get those kind of reductions, why can't Marin? And why should the folks in Santa Cruz have bragging rights and Marin can't? I didn't have Director Russell's numbers at hand, but I would have sure included those if I did. Congratulations to him. I'd really like to see a simple long-term conservation message that shows customers how they could trade car washing and irrigation for long-term water security. I believe that will require a detailed study of water usage by customer type. I'd like to see the district deeply understand their customers, engage with them, and continue building the long-term habits necessary to reach water security, even with the uncertainty of climate change. And if I could get hold of the data, I definitely volunteer to massage the numbers and look for ways to craft an enduring message.
Thank you, Mr. Sutter.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll add to this in the next agenda item.
Thanks, Phil.
Paul Mann, please, and then Ed. Mr. Mann. Okay, I'll get back to you, Mr. Mann. Ed? Ed?
Can you hear me?
Is
Sorry,
this
you want
Mr. Paul Mann?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Loud and clear.
Sorry, I was muted. First of all, thank you. I'm really glad you're talking about the subject of water supply towards resiliency and sustainability. There's clearly discussion around how much supply we need. There's challenges and costs around suggestions for increasing storage, but there is a solution that exists today that would double our storage without having to do studies and without having to meet resistance. And that solution exists at customers' properties. It's on the roof and it's in their drain pipes. And that's with gray water, that's with rainwater catchment, and that's with delivery of recycled water to refill these tanks. We only have to take a page from Australia, who went through the millennial drought, and in 9 years' time, they were able to cut their consumption by half. And they did it through a lot of methods, but these are 3 methods: through rainwater harvesting, through gray water, and through recycling systems in the home that actually increases storage locally and decreases all the carbon transfer costs and allows people to have water security and sustainability. So what I'd like to suggest is, as we look at money spent, can we look at investing in home infrastructure? Let's help to increase storage. Let's look at more rebates, more incentives to help homeowners actually support their water needs locally. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ed?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to respond to the recent discussion about conservation in the last 9 months or so since the crisis developed. The board set a goal of 40% conservation savings back in May, give or take a month. We stalled at 23% last summer. We're about 20%. As far as I've noticed the last couple of months, we've been at 20%. We've done that by not flushing toilets and taking spit showers. I don't think your customers are going to be happy continuing to do that to maintain a 20% so-called savings. That's not conservation, that's deprivation. In addition to that, ABAG has said we're going to have 13% more houses, whether we like it or not. We've got to find water for those houses. So I'm deflecting any suggestion that a 20% recent savings on conservation is sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. The next 2 speakers, last 4 digits is 1402, and then James Krajewski. 1402, please.
James Holmes Larkspur. I'd like to offer 2 requests for the water supply roadmap. First, develop a clear and specific timetable for completing the environmental work for the intertie. It's been suggested recently that the board hopes that interest in the pipeline project will diminish with time. However, as the board recognizes, the need for increased supply will not diminish. The board should combat the cynicism by committing itself to a clear, rapid, definitive timetable for completing the environmental review. Second, the board should open the way for the only totally reliable long-term solution: more local supply and storage. To do that, the district must make every effort to free itself from the stranglehold of the draconian 1995 order that allegedly prevents the development of more local supply and storage. If doing that requires special enabling legislation to work around the water board, then the board should start speaking with our state representatives. Above all, in proceeding, this board should not treat the terrible 1995 order as an immutable barrier, but rather as an obstacle to be overcome and overcome as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last speaker is Mr. Krajewski, please.
Hi, thank you. One of the things in this discussion that's sort of being touched on but largely missed is what is the mission of the water district? Is it to supply water to people, or is it to control people's water use? Is it to be a conservation district, or is it to be a water supplier? There's really no vision of the end point, and there's of what Marin should look like, or what Marin should be in terms of water use. So, you know, if we have 17 gallons per person per day, what is Marin environment going to look like, and what's going to happen to it? Or should we have 35 or 75 or whatever? But there needs to be some vision of what the water district is supposed to be doing, because it's all over the place. Sometimes it's a water police agency, other times it's a water supplier, and I don't know what the district thinks it really is, but I would hope it is a district that's set up to supply what the people of Marin want and what they think what they need, but at the same time to give it a vision of what it could be, or what the water use could be, and to give alternatives, and not to be a water police. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay. Well, that was a nice conversation. We appreciate the public's comment very much, and we take them to heart. Stay tuned. We'll be dealing with this issue over the next few months and into the year. But I can assure you, we will come up with a solution that works for everybody. Okay, let's go to item 17, which is a public hearing about reviewing the limits on water use and associated penalties.
Good evening, Board. Carrie Pollard, Water Efficiency Manager. I have this item. The ordinance before you this evening is to repeal the water use limits and the associated penalties that would be applied to water that is used in excess of those limits that were adopted back in September of 2021. The board may recall at the time of adoption, our reservoirs were historically low levels and the seasonal rainfall forecasts were highly uncertain. The district has received substantial rainfall, as Paul noted in the prior presentation, and therefore this item is being brought before you to repeal those water use limits. So when these limits were set, they would impact single family residential customers and irrigation customers, and they became effective on December 1st. Due to the 60-day billing period that the district utilizes, the first bills that would actually be impacted or being sent out to our customers would start on February 1st. So if approved this evening, none of our customers would actually receive a bill that contained these water use penalties for exceeding the water use limits that had been established. The staff recommendation is for the Board of Directors to adopt Ordinance 457, which will repeal Ordinance number 454, which established the water use limits and the penalties. During the DOC meeting, the Operations Committee last Friday, there was an additional presentation on the other restrictions that are currently in place, and staff will come back at a future board meeting in the near future to bring those before the board for consideration of repealing and then actually incorporating some into our normal year waterways prohibitions as well. But this evening, it's really focused on the water use limits and those associated penalties. The incentive programs that were developed during the drought to support our customers and the other initiatives, staff will continue to move forward with those, and you'll see part of that in the next item on non-functional turf. So tonight is really just looking at these, again, the water use limits and the penalties and potentially repealing those. So with that, I will be happy to take any questions.
Okay, just not to be too obtuse about it, but this really is just focus solely on the financial penalties and limitations that we put in as a really urgency matter back in what, August, September?
September 21st was when they were adopted. And yes, you're absolutely correct. It established limitations on how much water was available, would, be used without penalty charges being, presented to our customers or put onto our customers.
Right. So penalty assessments, essentially.
Right, right. This is making, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is making a distinction between the 4 or 5 conservation measures that we have that don't, they're I'll call them guidelines, but they're requirements, that we're not touching those. Right now, these are just those with a monetary penalty that we would be repealing, and we would be repealing without anyone even receiving a bill, much less paying a penalty.
You're correct.
Okay, and then there are others we should look at closely, and some of them are not realistic either under the normal circumstances. So the idea is those will be brought back at the near future, I'll call it, to evaluate one at a time.
Correct. That would be at the February 1st board meeting. I believe we'll bring back the other water waste prohibitions that were adopted as part of our drought response.
Okay, I like this.
Yeah, I think it's really good that we're kind of separating it out and taking a very deliberate look at it.
Right.
So I really appreciate that. It's not what I expected, so.
I think that this obviously makes sense given the current reservoir storage level and the water supply analysis that we were just provided, that shows that we are in highly different circumstances than we were last summer, and so it makes sense to repeal the penalties, and I think honestly and we do need to look at the other conservation measures. I think some of them do not make sense. In the context, I'm glad we're going to come back to those, and we should soon at their next board meeting. I do think, though, that going to a point that was raised by one of the speakers earlier is that we need to do. I really do think we need to do this message in conjunction with a message from the board that really does clarify why it is that we are taking this step and reducing penalties intended to increase conservation, to explain why we're doing that, yet at the same time we are I think not wanting to send the message that we are out of a serious water supply security situation that is the focus of the assessment that we just talked about. And I know that Director Gibson at our last meeting and I have both made points about adopting a board resolution that sends a message that we recognize that we have an ongoing water supply reliability emergency that will only be addressed by us actually developing new water supplies, probably through a mix of conservation and other projects that we've talked about. But until we do those things, we're not out of the woods. We do not have enough supply. And I think that we need to be, I would like to propose that we do develop that resolution so that we have a clear statement that we understand that we are not going back to the situation that we were in, that we do, where we might be relaxing or removing these penalties as we should, and other restrictions because they make sense. It doesn't change an overarching fact that we understand that we are in a different set of circumstances.
Yeah. We have, for the last year plus, had a long-term problem and a short-term problem. Nature solved the short-term problem. Now we are faced with the long-term problem. And that's, I think, what we have to continue vigorously to address.
Yeah, I agree. I think the timing of this is correct. I think there's no need to have measures that are punitive in light of the current situation, but I'm really so pleased that the board is so aligned about the need to continue with these resilience initiatives that have really gotten a boost this year. I mean, I don't think there's any question that, we have created new momentum in several directions at once that are all self-reinforcing to increase our resilience, both, I think, as everybody has said, around long-term reductions in demand management, as well as exploring these opportunities for new supply. So one thing I'm really pleased to see is that we are continuing with our rebate programs, to help everybody aspire to be as constructive as Director Russell and his wife. I don't know that we'll all get there to 17 gallons of water per person per day. But I'm just very pleased that we're keeping those programs in place. We're keeping those incentives in place, those long-term investments. But I strongly support the action that the staff has brought forward tonight.
Might indicate, and thank you for your comment, Cynthia, might indicate that one of the reasons I know that we're using that kind of water is because I have AMI. So we're able to look at our water usage in a few days for the last week. And without that tool, it's very difficult to know where you are, because if you wait 60 days or 90 days or whatever it takes to get the bill out and read,
Right.
It makes a very long time between the action and the response.
Yes, we have the same. I love having that app on my phone, and I will say that we're not as at quite at the point that you and your wife are, but I blame that entirely on the fact that my college-age son has been home for a month. So there you are.
Of course, you have 3 people. I mean, or six people, depending how you look at it.
All right.
Okay, Molly, should we open the public hearing then?
I think that's the appropriate next step. Yes, President Russell.
Okay, do I actually have to do anything to do that, or just?
You just say we're opening the public hearing.
Okay, we're opening the public hearing.
Okay, we have one public comment, Bill Sauter, Mr. Sauter.
Yeah, thank you. I was really glad to hear Director Schmidt and Director Gibson articulate the need for steady messaging. And I understand the bind that the district is in with having to pass this resolution to unpass the previous resolution. But I do think we have to acknowledge that it is giving somewhat of a mixed message, because I believe we're going to have a long-term conservation requirement, and stepping on the gas and stepping on the brake within months of each other is not helping to get that constant message across. I don't know if it's possible to maybe bring a little focus to this by saying that the board is going to think about this for another couple of weeks and see how we craft the message as we do this, to make sure that people don't get the idea that the spigots are open. I think that the district customers, I think, are going to have to come to a realization, as I have, that the days of washing my car may be over, and the days of heavy lawn irrigation may be behind us. And I think even this vote tonight, and I saw in the evening news, everybody's waiting for the vote to happen. I think it's a time when the spotlight's going to be on this vote. And if there were a way to put out a board statement along with this that says, yeah, we're not going to penalize people just to penalize them, but we are putting this out there as some immediate relief, but we're not taking our eye off the ball. And Marin County is going to have to figure out a way to make our existing water supply stretch for an extra year or so, because we're going to have times when the weather's not going to cooperate with us for a year beyond what we were thinking. So I don't know. I don't know what that message should be, which makes me really I'd love to have the data as to the users, who's using the water, what are they using it for, who do we really need to reach to get a 25% ongoing sustaining reduction in average water use, or 40%. What could we do? If Santa Cruz can do it, why can't we do it? So anyway, that comment, I appreciate that the boards need to act on this, but I'd be really careful about the messaging. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say quickly, I want to thank Phil for his comments, and I couldn't agree more. I think the danger of this being a mixed message is not insignificant. I think this, again, as I said before, I think this is the right move, but I think Mr. Sauter makes a strong point that we don't want to send the message that, we should be going back to watering medians and, so I think that is something for the board and the management team to consider together and, in how to explain this to the public. I think it's a strong point and an important one, and one that we need to have more conversation about.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a messaging component to this that we have invested a lot of time over the last year to engage our communities, and we need to keep that momentum going. And I do think that we need to explain as the district, we are the leaders in talking about water use in our communities. And I think that Adrienne, you've got as our communications expert, you've got a particularly important job in helping us to craft an effective message that explains how we are rolling back penalties, but we are not taking our focus off of the fact that we're still in a water supply reliability emergency.
Maybe it's time we move to the positive and emphasize more, as Cynthia said earlier, our rebate programs and that sort of thing. So that the same message gets out, but in a positive format.
Yeah, thank you, Jack.
Yeah.
I think we'll see some of that in the next item on the agenda tonight. One of the things I'd like to toss out for thinking is, what would happen if we just delayed the implementation date, shifted 454 to have a different implementation date, as opposed to removing anything at this point in time?
Molly, could you weigh in what that would look like? And
well, I think in front of the board, we have an ordinance, simply very brief and concise, that we would be repealing that the water use limits and the penalties that were adopted in that ordinance package. I think there's a couple of choices. If the board doesn't want to proceed with this tonight, that would be a different ordinance that would then, I guess, leave everything in place, or potentially, and I'm not sure if I'm clear on exactly what you're looking for, President Russell, a resolution that would, can you articulate what it is you would want to see happening if we didn't move forward, or if we wanted to? I'm not sure I understand what you're trying to accomplish.
454 had a start date of December 1st, as I recall.
Right.
So what if we just change that date to December 1st, 2022?
That would be a new ordinance that we could bring back. And if this, we could always bring back a different ordinance at another meeting. I think it's not feasible in this case for us to retool the current item the way that it's been drafted. So I think that would be a new item, either with or without action tonight on this one.
Yeah, we don't need to postpone it to do that in 2020. We could just recreate it if the circumstance justifies it.
That's correct. Certainly the board could act on that as a new matter at some time in the future if it becomes necessary.
Yeah, with the rebate concept, I see it actually as an opportunity for a positive message. If we don't divert this now, reverse it now, we've lost the opportunity to convert it to a positive message.
Okay, let's pick up Roger Roberts, who's waiting in the public hearing comment, and we'll get back to this.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes, in terms of messaging, one way to finesse this is to maintain a target, pick a number, 10%, 15%, 20% reduction in overall use long-term. And we're going to not penalize you now, but we're expecting you on your side to continue to conserve, and we have a target for all of us. And you can do that by simply saying, we maintain a desire to reduce demand by X%. Thank you.
Roger, can I ask you, I don't know if you mean to be doing this, but are you suggesting, and we've been kicking this around, but we haven't really had a focus board item on it. Are you suggesting budget-based rates?
In the long term, I think you need to go there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
There are none.
So now, Molly, I can close the public hearing, or we have to take an action first?
If the public is done with their comments, we can close the public hearing now.
Close it. Okay. So last chance, we'll close the public hearing. Okay. And now we can have the discussion, Jack, that we were talking about. I'm not hung up on what I'm proposing. I'm just trying to make life easy.
Yeah.
You know, and what worries me is exactly the comments that Phil made, you know, about sending out this mixed message of putting your foot on the brake and on the gas at the same time. You know, we've made great progress in my mind to reduce our demand. I agree and wholeheartedly support. Obviously, we're not watering outside at all at my house. And, you know, but we've been very successful controlling indoor usage. And as I said, it's not nearly as draconian as it was 2 months ago before it rained. 2 months ago, we were collecting the water from the shower and things like that and putting it in the toilets. We're not doing that.
Right.
But, you know, we have low use toilets, of course, and things like that. I'd also, I'm trying to remember the guy's name right now that wrote the op-ed recently, was complaining about the let it mellow, let it yellow, let it mellow, or whatever the words were. Just a suggestion there. There's a product made by Clorox that we found to be extremely useful. It's called Ultra Clean Toilet Tablets. They go in the tank. They do wonders on the maintenance of a chlorine residual in the toilet that controls biological growth in the toilet, just as a passing comment for how we can continue to conserve water. And particularly to make Jack's point, which is to reduce water wasting.
Right.
Because the toilet is as wasteful a machine as you can imagine. Thomas Crapper in its original design, it was used in a particular purpose because the toilets were in the dining rooms of the British homes. And that's how they got the name water closet. They actually were a water closet. So, you know, a lot of things have changed, and that's one that hasn't, is we still convey waste material with water. And, you know, there's no likelihood of that changing in the foreseeable future. So we're going to have to deal with that issue. Ultra low flush toilets help. Every little bit helps. So, and not flushing it helps even more.
Yeah.
So, Jack, you have a comment?
Well, I understand the concern we all have about mixed messages, and we worked hard on our message, and we're now changing the message. But what I'm suggesting is we have had to endure the water cop allegation for best part of a year because we had no choice. But now we have a choice. Now we can switch to a positive message and shoot for the same result. I mean, we should set the goal should be the same, but rather than do it in a negative message, which penalties obviously are, we do it in a positive message. You know, the cheerleader message. You know, and that's obviously up to our public information people to be able to do that. But they have in the past. I expect they'll do it again.
Yeah, I agree with Jack about the positive message. Maybe I'll slightly, I'll say I think we've been sending that positive message for a while. We've certainly been talking about rebates for substantially longer than we've been talking about penalties. It's been a relatively short period of time. And it does seem to me that the time to talk about penalties has passed. I'm not sure that that's a constructive message at this point. I think the public is aware that it's rained, that the reservoirs are in a very different posture than they have been. But I do think the focus needs to be on the positive messaging, on maintaining that momentum. So, you know, we can all be emulating, you know, Larry and Grace and, move in that direction. But I'm not sure we get there by continuing the penalty message.
I think we need to take a look at this when we do our next cost of service analysis. I know we can't just arbitrarily bake in conservation goals, but I think as far as how we are allocating our tiers, I think we need to look at the ending our summer rates. So I think there's things that, are not going to be easy. And we're going to get, a lot of criticism as far as modeling our rates to discourage excessive use. But at this point, given that it was an urgency measure and the immediate urgency has changed, if not passed, I mean, I just don't know if we have authority under Prop 218 to continue with the penalty program, given the change in circumstances. So, yeah, I understand, it's kind of a mixed message. The ordinance does say we acknowledge that water conservation is still needed and that drought conditions still exist. So, I mean, to me, this is something really we're almost duty bound to follow through on, as mixed a message as it may be.
Well, I mean, I think we can message it, however we're talented, to do. But Molly, do you want to speak to the 218? I hadn't seen the 218 issue, so I'm not sure. I assume you wouldn't have brought this forward if you felt there was a 218 issue.
No, I appreciate that, Director Kohler. In this, penalties are not a Prop 218 charge or rate. They are a different phenomenon. They are aimed at trying to achieve compliance with a very strict limit on water use. They are not aimed at raising revenue for the village. So there is a difference there that distinguishes them from Prop 218 rates.
But if there's no factual basis to charge the penalties, I think it's skirting Prop 218. So that's my
well, I think Director Bragman, I think that the focus is first on the water use limits and whether there is appropriate need justification for the district to restrict, curtail the water use, and that the penalties flow from that, no pun intended, that the penalties are a method to help compliance, help achieve compliance, help really reinforce the rule that we're telling people you cannot use more than X amount of water within this tier. It's going to be penalized. So we're not increasing rates based on the revenue or the drought. Rather, we're not trying to raise revenue or replace lost revenue. We're simply trying to reinforce a very strict rule that was adopted and put in place for good reason.
Right. And I'm just saying the rationale for that has, the short-term rationale has passed. And I guess my point is that it's when we go into our next cost of service analysis, we've got to see what we can do. And, that's going to also be a very difficult decision. So.
Okay. Thank you all. I guess what we need here is a motion.
I'll move approval for, I guess, staff's recommendation.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go on to item 18, prohibiting non-functional turf in commercial sector.
I also have this item, Carrie Pollard, Water Efficiency Manager. I have a presentation here. Let me pull it up. Okay, so this discussion on non-functional turf, right? This is one of our drought initiatives that kind of bubbled to the surface and that we continue to pursue. And so this is an informational item. We're going to start with here's the overview, looking at our preliminary evaluation of the amount of non-functional turf that we have in the service area, and then look at removal of existing commercial non-functional turf, and then also some actions that could be taken to prevent future installations, and this would be done through code updates. So evaluating the commercial non-functional turf, we found that we have 3.2 million square feet of commercial non-functional turf within the district. That's about 73 acres. These have been located on about 250 meters, which is roughly equated to the number of sites as well. The water savings is estimated to be about 350 acre feet per year. I want to note kind of where these areas were located. So this would be medians, golf courses, strip mall, retail establishments, and those sorts of locations. These areas do not include any residential, HOA common areas, multifamily housing, play areas in schools or parks, or churches or kind of institutional type locations. I did want to provide some examples because I think it really kind of helps tell the story of the areas that we're focusing in on. Here we have a center island, if you would, that is turf grass that is irrigated. We also have some areas like this, which is along a parkway strip. So you have a roadway here on the left, your sidewalk, and then the turf grass. You'll notice this is on a slope, and you can see the stains on the sidewalk from the overspray, and there's actually even water in the gutter as well. And so, this is a problem area really because of the slope, but, and then also overhead spray to turf irrigation is going to cause quite a bit of runoff. Another sample location would be kind of an entryway, if you would. So this is, there's a intersection here. It's highly unlikely that this area is ever going to be used for anything kind of, useful community benefit, if you would, right? It's probably highly unlikely that it's ever used or walked on except to mow. So as we look at opportunities for preventing the installation of non-functional turf and then also converting the current non-functional turf areas, we're going to start with the conversion item. So we would have a target effective date of March 2022 with a mandatory conversion required within 3 years, and that would be January of 2025. We would start with the notification of all the commercial non-functional sites. So again, we have a list of locations where these sites have been identified, and we would reach out to the owners to let them know of the new restrictions that may have been put in place, or the target for removal, to encourage them to participate in our programs. We'd also work with our local landscape contractors, landscape suppliers, nurseries, et cetera, recognizing that it will take, additional plant material, the water use plant materials, mulch, irrigation conversion kits, et cetera, to really make these changes happen. And so we want to give those industries, a little bit of a heads up as well. Looking at incentives for converting these areas to climate appropriate plant material, staff is proposing, or would propose for years 1 and 2, that we would continue to offer the $3 per square foot, which is currently our incentive offering for turf removal. In year 3, we'd reduce that down to $1 per square foot. And of course, this would all be included in our outreach materials so that these commercial sites would know up front, that they want to maximize their incentive by taking action, sooner than later. And then in year 4, there would be no incentive available for the removal, and staff would develop progressive enforcement to, really encourage customers to maintain compliance or obtain compliance. Some ideas where we might look at enforcement or some mechanisms we might use would be a reduction in water budgets, and another might be through penalties. And so this is really going to be kind of part of the evolution of I think, rolling a program like this out, recognizing, if we get a high level of compliance in the first 3 years, maybe these are the last few sites may require more hand-holding, and what would that look like? And if we get a low level of compliance, then we really need to evaluate kind of what the system is and, what penalties or implications may need to be rolled out. When we look at preventing the installation of commercial non-functional turf, what we would want to do is revise our current code to restrict the installation of turf in commercial developments. We already restrict the installation of turf in medians. So, for example, that center median, if today going through our landscape plan review, it would not be approved. So making changes like that. And those all kind of live within the water efficient landscaping section of our code. We'd also want to coordinate with our local land use planning jurisdictions, recognizing that any new development that is being built, their first stop is going to be, the planning and building departments. And so we would want to engage with those folks to make sure that they kind of help us increase the education as customers are pursuing developing these types of sites. These new connection restrictions would apply to water service applications received after 30 days of adoption. So depending on when this comes back to the board for approval, they would be at 30 days to kind of for rollout. The variance process, as I've mentioned before, the code has had a variance process forever. It's always been in place. And this is another opportunity for us to kind of lean on that option. If there is a site that needs to or can justify the need to have turf on, within the facility. Some examples might be a daycare facility that's in a, retail kind of strip mall or, kind of business center or type establishment. Another might be a veterinarian type location, again, where if they wanted to, or if they needed to come to us and say, here's the reasons why this turf needs to stay, we would work with them to pursue that variance. And this would apply to both new connections, but also the existing landscape areas. So looking at next steps, staff proposing to develop new codes to address both the removal of existing commercial non-functional turf, but also code to prevent the installation of commercial non-functional turf in new developments. We would anticipate bringing an ordinance for the board's consideration in February. Continue to work on the QA/QC of the turf area measurements that have been provided by our consultant. And then finally, I do want to recognize that the Water Efficiency Citizens Advisory Committee will provide input on the residential HOA common areas and multifamily housing aspect of non-functional turf. And the intent here would not be to address those within this process. We're really focusing in on commercial or non-residential type locations. And so with that, I'd be happy to take any feedback from the board on this proposal or any questions you may have as well.
I think your schedule is a little optimistic or a little draconian, depending on which way you look at it. I understand the goal. But I mean, let's look at the financial side. Let's say everyone wants to do it. It's $10 million if $3 a square foot for 3.2 million square feet. I haven't heard any rumbles in the budget of 10 million being available. So that's an issue we need to think about hard and plan for. I also see, while I fully understand and appreciate it, this is not Las Vegas, and it's a different environment. And I don't know how it's going to go down. I've even thought as much as we should think about an EIR on something like this, very frankly, all the way out to that level to get full public engagement. So anyway, I'll stop talking and turn it over to the rest of the board and see what they have to say.
Well, I certainly agree with Larry that we should have full public engagement, but 10 million doesn't sound a lot to me when we were talking about 100 million for potentially much more expensive water. So Carrie, I may have missed it, but do you have an estimate of a per acre foot cost? You may not be there yet.
No, we're not there. We have an estimate of savings. So, we could back into that, assume it, using a number of assumptions, but no, we're not right there yet.
I mean, the other water supply resilience measures we're looking at, Larry, are so much more expensive. So, I mean, I wouldn't say this is, I think we should be doing all those other things, but this strikes me as a relatively low cost compared to some of the other options.
All I was trying to say, Cynthia, is there's no budget number for it yet.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's true for all. I mean, I certainly support our moving forward on all these other measures, but if we can make a significant, dent in our demand, then, that's cheap compared to what we spend on other water supply options.
And it's permanent change. It's a permanent reduction.
That's the thing. It is. That's exactly right. So in that respect, it's really no different than, the intertie or some of the other measures that we've been talking about. So I think I just want to really commend staff for keeping this kind of thing on the table.
Yeah,
Would we
likewise.
allow?
Go ahead, Larry.
Well, I was going to say, would we allow folks to put in large cisterns? You know, in a large office building, they might be able to collect enough water off their roof to water their grass. Would we still have that limitation, or we would allow that kind of irrigation?
Yeah, that wouldn't be potable water, right, Carrie? So that would be allowed, I imagine.
Correct. We would write the code to address that, right? Recognizing it's to reduce potable water.
I mean, just at my email, I assume the rest of you too, very large, significant numbers of people asking about, cisterns and that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, in addition to the water savings, which of course are the most important, I think that there is a very important, again, community education benefit to this, to explaining that, that where we do have functional turf, that's still going to be allowed, but there are places where we just don't need grass. And I think that maybe hopefully will help other folks to look at their own landscaping and say like, oh, do I really need to have grass there? Or could I put something else that's drought tolerant? I think I think there's an important message there as well. So I'm really glad that staff has continued to develop this, and I think we should continue to move forward.
And I don't know if you meant it quite this way, Larry Russell, but when you say it's not Las Vegas, I mean, Las Vegas is way higher than we are in their water consumption. I mean, they've invested a lot. They've come down from the days when they were over 200-300 gallons of water per person today. I mean, Carrie, you can tell me if I'm right about this. I think they're right around 190 now. We're all the way down to 124, and they've got plenty of turf. So, I don't think anybody's talking about, we obviously have a very different climate, but we don't have very, well, I don't want to go down that road, but I don't think we should be comparing ourselves to other communities that way. We are a Mediterranean climate. I think, at least as I understand where you're going, Carrie, this is about recognizing and embracing that is the climate that we're in.
Absolutely. I mean, and also recognizing it's an opportunity for water savings, right? We don't need to have turf grass in those types of areas. I think the examples really kind of go to show that that there is truly an opportunity, and we can use it as an opportunity to also demonstrate really beautiful the water use plant materials, right? There's some great examples in the community already, and we can really kind of just continue to push that again to ultimately motivate residential customers as well, giving them good examples.
I think the comment Larry Russell made about exempting water collected from roofs and cisterns is a really important one, because that seems to be a very underutilized strategy in Marin. And I'm kind of surprised looking at the numbers, which I got to say, Carrie, I think you've done an amazing job really getting this program up and running in the last year. It's phenomenal, in my opinion, really, the job that you and your team have done. But to really encourage alternative strategies to maintain turf in certain areas, like the one that kind of jumped out at me is golf courses. I don't know what percentage of that 350 acres is golf courses, or are golf courses, but I would imagine it's a pretty high percentage. But what they may have capacity to actually harvest water from their roof and elsewhere that, could come in to supplement their irrigation needs. So I support it. I think we should move forward with it. These are the type of long-term changes that we need to support and are entirely consistent with our long-term strategic goals to adapt to climate change. So again, I really appreciate the work and keeping the ball moving. So.
Yeah, it's about 73 acres, Larry. So I don't think it includes any golf courses in that number.
Well, that
3 million square feet.
That was included in the definition of non-functional turf.
So the nuance is about the golf course, right? So we're not talking about play areas. We're talking about kind of like entryways, right? Where it's just, you know, we're not focusing on play areas, even when we consider golf courses, right?
Okay. All right. So that's the distinction. Okay.
Yeah, like I say, it's only 73 acres. You know, a golf course is hundreds of acres. So, you know, each one.
Okay, my mistake then. So, yeah.
But the issue is still there. And the Meadow Club has expressed interest in using reclaimed water. It's just a matter of working with them to get it. The Peacock Gap is going to get reclaimed water. So we're knocking those guys off, which just takes time. You know,
yeah,
that's a whole nother discussion. But no, this is great.
Yeah, I mean, encouraging those other strategies. It's not just a question of stopping, you know, irrigation. It's like,
yep,
can we get that water from somewhere else? Is there another way to do it? You know, so
yeah, you know, I moved here in '92, Larry, and we didn't live in the house for about 3 months while we remodeled, and basically it was in the middle of a drought, and we didn't water at all. We just let the grass go fallow, and I looked at putting in a cistern. In '92, it was a $50,000 investment to put in an adequately large cistern to take care of my house for a year. I could do complete irrigation for $50,000 with no water usage, no imported water usage. But you know, that's a chunk of change, huh? And I think that's the reason you haven't seen these big cisterns go in. You know, one for a large building, you know, could easily run into $1 million.
Yeah, I'm talking about rainwater collection. I'm talking about a little
Me too.
lower.
No, that's exactly what I'm talking about. But it's to get the usage for 1 year, you need a lot of volume.
Yeah, and a lot of space.
So that's what runs the numbers. It's about 25,000 gallons, about the size of a good sized pool. But I was going to build a tank under the dirt, you know, to do it. And that it just, you know, the economics just didn't intrigue me at that point in time. Today's different.
Yeah, it is.
You know.
Okay. I just want to express appreciation to staff, and you know, I think the next step really probably is to, you know, put some cost numbers to it, but you know.
Yeah, it's worth.
Does it make sense? I for myself, I need more details on it, and I want to know more about it. Does it make sense for this to go to a committee to get written up a little bit closer?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, we'll do that.
But I just really want to commend staff for their, this was a fantastic presentation, Carrie.
Okay, public comment.
Yes, we have 4 speakers. The first 2, Paul Duder, then Roger Roberts. Mr. Duder.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty good idea, but I just have an observation. If you, the goal here is not really to get rid of grass or turf, it's really to stop using potable water for it. And so it's actually kind of easy to do that. You just have to turn off your sprinkler system. You don't really have to replace it. If you let grass, you know, again, we're different. Our climate is different than Las Vegas. If you stop watering grass in Las Vegas, it goes to be a desert. If you stop watering grass in Marin, it goes dormant, and then it comes back in the winter when it rains. A lot of people might want to keep their grass and just let it go dormant in summer. I'm just wondering if that would be part of the provision.
Interesting question.
Okay, Mr. Roger Roberts.
Yeah, a question. Why not include non-functional turf for public entities, municipalities, and the like? And include them in the outreach and the program.
Good point.
Yeah, I think that's a really important. Carrie, can you, I know you're on mute right now, but can you speak to that a little bit, what the plan is there? Because I mean, I think Roger makes a really critical point about, you know, and we've talked about this a lot about, you know, partnering with, you know, our local municipalities.
Yeah, so again, these areas are really focused on areas that don't provide community benefit, right? They're not really utilized. So if there's a parkway strip, there's the road, there's a small strip of grass, and there's a sidewalk, and then there's the whole city park. We're really just focusing on that strip of grass that's between the sidewalk and the road, right? Recognizing that the park is there to provide community benefit. And so, you know, those areas would be owned by a municipality, but for sure, we will reach out to our, you know, local jurisdictions who are our partners in all of this, to work with them on, you know, finding, you know, if they could justify the need to maintain the turf, that's fine. And if there's areas that they may find other areas in, you know, locations they own that they may be willing or needed to you know, make sense for them to remove. So in some municipal areas are included in the this analysis that was presented this evening.
Thank you. Next two speakers, Paul Mann, then Ed. Mr. Mann.
Hi, it's me again. I just wanted to clarify just a statement of you actually don't need to spend $50,000 to put in rain catchment. My company, Water Champions, we're out there every day. We're doing this 1,000 gallons, 5,000 gallons, 10,000 gallons. And, you know, these are typically $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 installations. And our customers are actually using recycled water from you guys. They're getting it, having it trucked, and they're refilling during the hot summer months. So they can actually have a source of water all through the year, and it doesn't have to be expensive. So I just wanted to add that as it to Mr. Bragman's point, it is something that is becoming more and more popular because it's a reservoir. It's a home reservoir. And if done properly, if we can get recycled water to them, it can become much more cost effective for them to keep their landscapes green. It's ridiculous that half the water, potable water, goes to the landscape. It could be recycled water. It could be rainwater. It could be gray water. So that's what I just want to encourage we think a little bit more about for long-term sustainability. And with that, we'll cut our water usage in half. At my house, we're 100% recycled water. We don't use any potable water for our landscape. It's possible.
And how do you deal with the subsurface requirements of the state in the use of that water? Subsurface distribution.
So speak a little bit more to your question.
The state health department requires that any gray water or recycled water be applied subsurface. You can't sprinkle it.
Absolutely.
Not stay in compliance with the law.
Oh, you bring up a great point. So what we do is we dig mulch basins, which are mini reservoirs for every plant. And to your point, the gray water has to go 4 inches below the surface. And so what we're doing is we're keeping more water on the property, which is a very old way of keeping the landscape not only greener, but more fire resistant. And it's not, you're getting water to the surface all throughout the year, or to the plant all throughout the year, rather than just during irrigation months.
Thank you.
Ed?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Very quickly addressing the question of cash for grass costs, there was a package of about 15 slides presented by you folks, I'm sure, at MMWD to the East Bay Mud Board on November 9th to their planning commission. It showed about 7 or so actions being taken to achieve conservation. The first line was our 400,000 square feet a month turf for grass thing. At a cost of $3 a square foot for a monthly cost of 1.2 million. And whether this is right or wrong, I can't tell you, but what was shown on the slide was that $1.2 million a month would save 177 acre feet a year. That's what's on the slide. And that works out to $6,780 per acre foot, which is an obscene waste of the ratepayers' money. If those numbers are wrong, they're on the slide. So, but if you're talking $7,000 an acre foot, this is an idea that never should have gotten out of the starting blocks. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
There
you.
are no There are no further speakers.
Okay, let's move on to item 19, which is future meetings.
Could we talk about that cost factor before we move on? I mean, if you take that cost factor over a period of years, it's going to be vastly reduced. So you may have an initial 1 year cost of 6,000 an acre foot, but if you take that over 20 years or 30 years, it's going to go way, way down. So, I mean, you can't just, segment the savings for 1 year. You've got to do your calculation for long-term savings. So I think, I just think that the logic and the economics of it has to be understood by the public a little more deeply than that. So I just wanted to reply to that last comment.
Thank you for that, Larry. I'm glad that you did it. I was thinking the same thing. And I do think that this is part of what we need to do when we have these public meetings and we do an assessment report. We do need to provide some basic information for people to understand how we assess the cost benefits of these different alternatives. Because another factor of what we were just talking about, when you're talking about reducing dry season water need, that is more difficult water to secure. And another way to put it is right now, to be able to find drought resilient water supply alternatives, those are more costly to achieve than finding wet water in a wet year. So being able to reduce irrigation of landscaping plays to a really important part of our water use at a time when water is really precious. So looking at the cost out over time is important, but also looking at how it plays as a drought resiliency mechanism is another factor.
Yeah, so you have to look at it holistically. I mean, you can't just, focus on 1 year and, that's your cost, because these savings, as was mentioned earlier by Director Russell, Director Kohler, are permanent. So, you could just as well say, what's the cost over 50 years? But, at some point, your calculation has to take into account that these are long-term changes and are going to have long-term benefits, long-term savings that reduce their price in the long run. So it's just, you got to look at it holistically.
Okay. Item 19.
Carrie, it looks like you're trying to say something, but you're muted.
Oh, I apologize. Thank you. I was going to say Ed would like to make another comment, if that's okay.
Okay.
Ed?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Thanks. I think Mr. Bragman raises an outstanding point. My understanding is all the numbers we've been looking at for the last 9 months, longer for you folks, are calculated the same way on an annual yield in acre feet. And if I misunderstood that all along, I apologize for that, but I believe that's the case. So when you've been looking at reservoir additions and raising dam heights and all that, my understanding is all of those calculations are done on a comparable basis. Paul Celia, I'm sure, knows the answer to this, or could certainly respond to that later on. But
yeah, there's a difference, Ed. When we're buying or getting water, there's a difference because that's a consumptive use. We bring it in, we use it. But when we're talking about this kind of thing, it conserves the water. So Larry Bragman is right. It's a long-term thing. I don't know what the right number is. It logically is almost infinity to divide by. So,
okay, thank you for that.
It's
I understand,
different.
but I don't understand. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just as a rule
Okay.
of thumb for evaluating savings, I'll just say we usually use about 20 years for turf programs, recognizing that there could be some changeover, right? So looking at 20 years of savings at 350 acre feet a year, even if it's $10 million, it's less than $1,500 per acre foot. So
yeah, but that's totally arbitrary. And in a situation like this, that's true for capital improvement things where you spend money to do something. Where you spend money to remove something, it's a different animal, huh? Because it gives forever. So I think that it's much longer than 20 years. The 20 years works when you have to replace it, because you spend the money to get it, then you got to replace it, then you got to put the money back. But when it's just removal, it's a different animal.
That's really true. Thank you.
Okay, fourth time, item 19.
Item 19, thank you, directors. So we will have our next Finance and Administration Committee meeting on Thursday, January 27th at 9:30. Then we'll have our regular board meeting February 1st. Also, we'll have external meetings coming up. For those of you on the Lagunitas Creek Technical Advisory Committee or interested in going to the meeting this Friday at 10 a.m., there's a meeting. Also, the North Bay Watershed Association will have their board meeting February 4th on Friday, and then the Sonoma Water Agency Commission meeting will be Monday, February 7th. I also had sent you a request on your availability regarding the reestablishment of the Water Resiliency Committee to have our first meeting as early as February 8th, if possible. If that's not doable, we would like to do it. I believe it's February 22nd. And again, after 5:30. So I only heard from 2 of the directors, but I need to hear from all 3. The 2 of the directors that responded said any of those dates and times would work. The 3rd date, I apologize for the possibility of our first Water Resiliency Committee is March 8th, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm wondering if we could settle for a date in February, preferably February 8th. That would be great, but if that's not doable, please let me know and we can try to shoot for February 22nd.
I can do the 8th.
I can do, what time are you thinking on the 8th?
5:30 is early, but if not, we could do it at 6 if we're trying to have everyone available too. So if you can do February 8th at 6.
5:30 is a little better for me.
Okay.
I can do 6. I can't do 5:30.
Well,
yeah, no more 5:30s. They just don't work. Is there a reason we're not doing it in the daytime?
Excuse me.
I can't before 5:30.
We certainly could do the daytime. There was some discussion, we were talking about this committee. Should we do it just at board meetings and not set up this committee? And one issue was the availability of folks that may be working. So it's just staff's thought, at least the first meeting we would do in the evening to address that issue and to get this ball rolling.
I'm fine since that works better for Monty. My preference is to do it at 5:30, but I can do 6 that day.
Yeah, I can do 6 on February 8th.
Okay, then go ahead.
No, that's okay. Then you have enough information to move
yeah,
forward?
we'll definitely do February 8th. That's 5:30.
Yeah, I don't have my calendar in front of me, unfortunately. You know,
it's got to be 6.
6.
6 o'clock.
6. Okay,
yeah,
thank
6
you.
o'clock.
6. Thank you. February 8th at 6.
okay, again, I don't have my calendar in front of me, so I don't know if that's good for me or not.
Okay, we'll loop back with you, Jack.
Yeah.
And Ben, I would like to see an agenda sooner than later. Okay, so to see what if it's just organizational, that's fine. But if we're going to have substantive conversation, let's have some items to discuss.
Yeah, I think it'll be a combination, but we were looking at taking this opportunity. I have gotten some questions from board members on the charge, the logistics, the frequency. So I did really want to take the opportunity at the first meeting to talk about that. But I do believe there may be a couple items too as updates. And so we'll start working on that now that we have a date.
Well, surely we can start talking about the EIR. That's
right,
an obvious one, you know. So the scoping of that is a good one. I don't know how much will get covered on the 1st versus the 8th, but you know, you can use the 8th to fill in the gaps from the 1st if needed.
I'm sorry, is there a meeting on the 1st?
Next
It's a
board
regular
meeting,
board meeting.
February 1st.
Sorry, I misunderstood. Thanks.
Okay. So everybody cool?
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you all. See
All
ya.
right, thank you all.
Thanks, folks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.